Imagine yourself navigating in a boat on an unfamiliar river. You are alone in the boat with a bottle of water and a pair of oars. The water flow is slow, the river is calm, but you have no map to know where the flow is leading you. What would you do in such a situation? On one hand, the river is quiet and flows slowly, and you have no reason to worry. On the other hand, you do not have a map and you do not know whether the river leads you to a destination. You do not know if it may lead you to hazards such as waterfall or village of cannibals. In such situation, people usually tend to either develop anxiety and panic, or on the other hand, people tend to get into complacency. Everything is pastoral and there are no dangers. And if there are dangers, they are invisible and therefore intangible. I can't see you to ask, but please try each of you to imagine his or her possible reaction. We see that the same situation lead to opposite reactions and behaviors. What makes the difference between the behavior is the unique personality of the person and especially the paradigms he has created during his life. The paradigm is an automatic activation of a neural network in the brain with a corresponding activation of the autopilot within the self to produce an immediate emotional and cognitive behavioral pattern. Paradigms are the product of human learning. They generate immediate behavior and were originally created by natural selection to enhance survival. Learning is a universal process developed by natural selection in which the species, human or animal, assimilate their experiences to enhance survival and adaptation. In human beings, the learning generates behaviors that go through the autopilot in what Kahneman terms system one or fast thinking before arriving to conscious awareness. Kahneman approach is consistent with Libet's research from 1983, according to which the readiness potential for human behavior precedes its occurrence in consciousness. If we condition a mouse into avoidance learning in moving through an electrified maze, if he moves in the maze when it is not electrified, his brain will extinct the anxiety response. The brain learned the changes in the environment and adapted the mouse to the new conditions. Human beings are no different in this respect from any other species. The brain adapts its behavior according to the changes in the environment. However, in humans, we often find that the brain learns dysfunctional behaviors that contradict adaptation and generate ill being. In claustrophobia, for example, we see that the elevator is unconsciously perceived as a hazardous place. This perception generates anxiety and the formation of apparently rational theory as to why it is dangerous. For example, the elevator might crash, I could be suffocated there because of lack of oxygen, etc. It seems that the unconscious phobogenic object deforms the reasoning of the individual and in addition exacerbates his anxiety by producing anxiety from anxiety. Such reactions do not occur in other species. You might say, surely humans are more complex and clever than the mouse. But the learning process is universal in nature. Many generations of research psychologists have learned about human behavior from laboratory experiment on mice. In addition, human wisdom works here against the individual well-being, generating suffering in these circumstances. So it is not human wisdom or stupidity that generate the dysfunctional learning. There are other factors involved. Learning happens to adapt to life in natural environment, which is originally in the wild. And it is especially effective in life-threatening situations. The living environment of humans is human cultures, which are environments of symbols. In symbolic environment, the hazards we encounter are also symbolic, but they put us in a FFF condition, fight, flight, freeze, as if they were life-threatening. A boycott at school, critical comments by parents, or humiliating remark by the boss, and today also shaming in the social networks are not life-threatening, but activate the survival programs of FFF as if they were. The learning process produces neural networks that fixate the learning. This way, in any similar situation where we feel symbolically threatened, our organism will respond as if it were life-threatening. And yet, we know that the brain has an amazing adaptability. As a complex adaptive system, it has the ability of self-regulation, neuroplasticity, and neurogenesis, and to reorganize itself following feedback. Most scientists today believe that the brain is the only source of consciousness. So why doesn't the brain correct the dysfunctional learning? We can see that when FFF and stress reaction are activated due to symbolic threat, the learning process becomes much less effective for our adaptation. For example, if my boss insults me, I feel anxiety, lack of self-value, or anger. The blood flow to the muscle for FFF response instead of flowing to the brain where it is most needed to deal with a symbolic threat. My reaction will depend upon my value system, the social norms in my culture, and previous patterns of behavior I've learned in my life. In short, here the dominant paradigm in my life are activated, and if we remember, they are activated by the autopilot without conscious control. It appears that when we activate learning to improve adaptation, we create paradigms that involve higher function of consciousness, such as value system, self-perception, social perception, as well as our worldview. If we want to analyze how the higher function of consciousness interfere in our learning process, we have to look at one of the complex riddles that have preoccupied some of the greatest minds in the history of philosophy and science. This is the question of the relationship between the brain and consciousness, and also, in our interest, between the brain and the self. And it is more mysterious than the Trump-Putin hidden relations. This age-old problem of brain consciousness, was described by David Searles as how does the brain get over the hump between electrochemistry to feeling? And Gerald Edelman put it in his poetic words, how matter becomes imagination. At this point, some of you may say, we've come to learn practical techniques for improving well-being in the workplace and not to delve into philosophical, scientific, complex riddle like the brain-consciousness relationship. For that, I have two answers. In the first one, I lean on the shoulder of a giant like Kurt Lewin, who said, there's nothing more practical than a good theory. The second answer stems from the supervision I gave to my students on this approach. The first key to deal with this mystery is given by the physicist and Nobel Prize laureate Murray Gell-Mann. Gell-Mann suggests that the scientific project is composed of one integrative system in a hierarchical order from from elementary physics to chemistry, biology to psychology, and we may add sociology and ecology at the top. Each discipline contains the law of the discipline below. However, the higher discipline accumulates additional information and develop additional laws to deal with its particular environment. A scientific project, say Gelman, is the study of the law of different disciplines. The study is performed from up down and down up, and the scientific project enables us to build bridges between the disciplines. However, says Gelman, in his book The Quark and the Jaguar, the leaping jaguar behavior could be understood by biology's law. Yet it is not comprehensible by particle physics. Although the jaguar, like any other organism and object in the universe, is composed of quarks, there's no way to understand its leap by the activity of the quarks that compose its organism. The brain and consciousness belong to two different disciplines. Consciousness, being part of the self, is central in the study of psychology, while the study of the brain lies in biology and neuroscience. However, the biological, chemical, and physical levels that operate in the brain cannot explain the higher function of the self, such as the creation of value system and personal vision, self-actualization, the need to create meaningful, authentic life, and to leave a footprint in this world beyond the material existence. All these human characteristics are intrinsic in human cultures. As put it, the distinguished biologist, Nobel Prize laureate Francois Jacob, natural selection could have formed the brain, but cannot create Macbeth. If we accept Gelman's view, we can conclude that the higher function of the self do not originate directly in the brain. The accumulation of extraordinary achievement of the human spirit are the result of accumulation of millions of human brains throughout human cultural histories. The higher functions of the self co-evolve with the brain, which need to support these features and change consequently by neuroplasticity and neurogenesis, creating more neuronal networks and developing and co-evolving with itself. So even though the higher function of the self co-evolve with the brain and cannot exist without it, they are dependent on the human culture, which does not have the mechanism of self-regulation and self-organization evolved in the brain over millions of years of evolution. Culture functions by symbols and abstractions produced by language that are often misleading, as we see, for example, in demagogy or conflicting ideas about a given reality. In the extreme, social cultural influence could cause a person to starve himself to death, become a suicide bomber, or torch himself because of social pressure, ideology, or his value system. In doing so, the person acts against the biological imperative of survival installed in the brain and kills himself with his brain, and the brain can do nothing about it. We will see now the practical implication of this situation to enhance well-being. Before that, I would like to apologize for going through very complex and profound issues quite schematically due to time constraint. More broadly and in depth, I have discussed this issue in the book, The Mindful Brain, that will be available for free in Amazon today and tomorrow for the delegate of the conference. So the maladapted paradigm generates psychopathological syndrome, low self-esteem, or lack of meaning or direction in life. These drive people to psychotherapy, life coaching, Buddhist therapy, New Age seminar, or positive psychology and self-help book. The coach might lead the coachee to the future to realize his vision. Classical psychotherapy is hermeneutic, striving to generate insights that produce change. Positive psychology studies positive emotions and attitude and recommends adopting them. Buddhist psychology speaks of resignation and forgiveness as a way for more rewarding life. And New Age approaches teach you that you have to look forward, promising you that whatever you want, you will achieve. What are the potential obstacles of these pathways? It is not always clear to the coachee, client, or New Age fan what happiness means for him. The person is not always emotionally prepared for reconciliation and forgiveness with the world as the compassionate Buddhist therapist offers. Behavior seldom changes following general prescriptions or recommendations. And finally, the person does not always agree that the finding of positive psychology relevant to his personality and to his life. I'm not smarter than any one of the other practitioners to offer the ultimate solution. I know, however, about the wisdom installed in the brain by natural selection designated to enhance survival. Researchers of Panksepp, followed by Hanson and Turnbull, suggest three important command programs in the brain: the survival adaptation program, the search reward, and the attachment program. The survival program is designated to intercept dangers when individual person or animal experiences a threat. It produces the FFF response operated by cortisol and adrenaline transmitters. A second brain program has been termed by Panksepp as system of seeking and reward and is located mainly in the ventral tegmentum operated by dopamine and serotonin. This program is probably developed by natural selection for survival. The search and reward is an inborn instinct that allows the newborn to spot the mother nipple, which is crucial for his survival. Later on in life, when the newborn grows up, the seeking reward program becomes independent of survival need and generates in the adult individual curiosity, expectation, satisfaction, creativity, and joy. The third brain program, attachment, the attachment program also related to survival. It's the basis to the mother-child bonding relations, generating caring, empathy, involvement, compassion, and love. It is located mainly in the anterior cingulate gyrus and is operated by oxytocin and prolactin. Later on in life, the attachment becomes independent of survival and put the basis to the individual social and interpersonal relations, to altruism, empathy, and love, to his feeling of belonging to the family and the community. These survival mechanisms are originally the natural source of confidence, assertiveness, serenity, equanimity in the survival program, of authentic joy, creativity, curiosity in search reward program, of true empathy, compassion, and love in the attachment program. In the very young, we can find genuine behavior of confidence, joy, excitement, curiosity, expectation. We also find in the young spontaneous and limitless attachment and unconditional love because they are naturally installed in the human brain. These wonderful qualities are embedded in each of us by natural selection, but usually arrested by the growth-blocking paradigm. One can revitalize these qualities by developmental approach of coaching psychology integrated with various techniques of psychotherapy. This approach I developed during the last 15 years in the coaching psychology programs that I founded and directed at Tel Aviv and Bar Ilan universities. The other teachers and me also supervised the coaching of the students at this approach. So if I put in a nutshell what has been said so far, I suggested that the learning process that exists in nature to enhance survival becomes dysfunctional in human cultures. Human culture generates the self-higher function independently of the brain regular activity. Their intervention generates maladapted paradigms that often impairs life quality and well-being. I suggest that the Holy Grail is within us by the activation of the naturally installed brain control program and overcoming the symbolic threat. Since I cannot see you, I want to ask you if you remember the early days when you felt carefree joy and boundless emotional connection. But I'm sure you can remember some of it. And even if you remember, if we do not remember such moment, we can return to this moment by psychological interventions. The source lies in each of us. This is our human evolutionary patrimony. The unique expression of the evolutionary installed control program is special for each of us. The same way as all the other universal features of a person, such as his character and his appearance, are unique and different from those of others. And within the unique form you will find of that evolutionary human potential within yourself lies your authenticity. And from here it is easy to elaborate the unique and authentic meaning in your life. At bottom, every man knows well enough that he is unique being, only once on this earth, and by no extraordinary chance will such a marvelously picturesque piece of diversity and unity as he is ever be put together a second time. Friedrich Nietzsche. So the human common ground paradoxically turns our search for authenticity into also a search of the common ground between us and the other. As Nietzsche said, we are a piece of diversity in unity, and we are always part of something bigger than us, part of the natural world and of human culture. It is not a mystical matter, but a fact of life. And we will end this with the words of the 13th century Japanese Zen master who present the other side of the coin. To learn the Buddha way is to learn about oneself. To learn about oneself is to forget oneself. To forget oneself is to perceive oneself as all things. So the meeting place between the search for the wonderful uniqueness of each of us within our culture and humanity is the melting pot of our authentic meaningfulness in life. Thank you for your listening.